Bonjour tout le monde! Aujourd'hui, nous allons apprendre le passé composé pour les verbes qui utilisent êtres for an auxiliaire. So today we're going to be looking at the 10% of verbs that use êtres as an auxiliary verb when written in the past tense. Please take the time during this lesson to take notes. If at any time during this lesson you need to pause the video so you can catch up on your note-taking, please feel free to do so. Alors, nous allons commencer. Now, as a review, when writing in the past tense, you need to have your three components. You need to have your sujet, which is your je, tu, il, elle, nous, vous, il, elle. Someone's name, maybe. You need to also have your auxiliaire, so your verb avoir or êtres conjugated in the present tense. In this lesson, we're focusing on the 10% of verbs that use êtres in the present tense as its auxiliary verb. And finally, you need to have your participe passé. So you need to have the past participle of the verb that you're choosing to write in the past tense. Now, these are the 16 verbs that use êtres as its auxiliary verb when you are conjugating them in the past tense. We remember these 16 verbs by remembering the acronym Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp. Now, some of these verbs have a past participle that look very similar to the past participles of verbs that use avoir as its auxiliary verb. For example, all the ER verbs follow the same conjugation rule as regular RE verbs. You would drop the ER at the end, and you would add an E accent aigu. But the conjugation rules are not always the same for all the verbs. For example, you have venir. It ends in IR, but we don't drop the IR and we add an I. In fact, the past participle for venir is venu. Take a look at mourir. It has an IR at the end, but we don't drop the IR and we add an I. In fact, its past participle takes on a whole new spelling, more. So these are some of the reasons why these 16 verbs are so special when you're conjugating them in the past tense. And the more you use them and the more you're familiar with them, the more you'll recognize that they're special, that they have special spellings, and that they use êtres as its auxiliary verb. Now you will notice that a lot of these verbs are opposites, and this may help you remember that they are part of that list of 16 that follow a very special set of rules when conjugating them in the past tense. For example, you have the verb mourir, which means to die, but you also have the verb naître, which means to be born. Opposites. You have the verb monter, to climb or to go up. But you also have the verb descendre, which means to go down. More opposites. You have the verb arriver, which means to arrive. You also have the verb partir, which means to leave. More opposites. You have the verb entrer, which means to enter. And you also have the verb sortir, which means to go out. So as you can see, a lot of opposites. Let's take a look at an example of a Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verb conjugated in the passé composé. As I've stated, Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs conjugated in the passé composé use the verb êtres in the present tense as its auxiliary verb. So in the first two columns, you can see that I conjugated the verb êTRE in the present tense with the subjects listed. Now the participe passé, or the past participle of the verb venir, which is a Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verb meaning to come, is venu. So I put that in the third column of this table. Now please note, all Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verbs conjugated with the verb êTRE in the present tense may have agreements at the end of their past participles. Let's go through this table so I can show you what I mean. Je suis venu. I came. I put an E in brackets at the end of venu because je could refer to a guy or girl. Tu es venu. You came. Once again, there is an E in brackets because tu could be a guy or a girl. Il est venu. He came. There's no agreement at the end of venu here because il is always masculine singular. Elle est venue. She came. I put a definite E at the end of venu because elle is always singular and feminine. Nous sommes venus. We came. I put an E in brackets because nous could be a group of girls. And there is a definite S because nous is always plural. Vous êtes venus. You came. I put an E in brackets because vous could be a group of girls. But I also put a definite S because vous is always plural. Ils sont venus. They came. I put a definite S at the end of venu because il pluriel refers to a masculine plural group. Please note that you would also use il pluriel for any group that is a mix of guys and girls. So il pluriel can refer to a group of all guys or it can refer to a group of guys and girls. But you would still follow this agreement here of adding an S at the end of your Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp past participle. Elles sont venues. They came. I put a definite E and a definite S at the end of venu because elle pluriel is always a group of girls. Please note that these agreements that I underlined in the third column would be added to the end of any past participle of a Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verb. Let's take a look at some examples. Je suis né à Essex en 2005. I was born in Essex in 2005. Il est arrivé à l'école à 8h15. He arrived at school at 8:15. Elles sont descendues l'escalier. They went down the stairs. Let's take a closer look at this example. Je suis né à Essex en 2005. I was born in Essex in 2005. As you can see, I put an E in brackets because I'm not sure if the je is referring to a guy or a girl. Let's say you're writing me a paper though, and you wanted to say, Je suis né à Essex en 2005. You need to have the appropriate agreement in place, but you don't need any brackets because I know who the paper is coming from. For example, let's say my brother is submitting a paper, and he wrote, Je suis né à Essex en 2005. He would write né like this because he's a guy. But let's say my cousin Joanne was writing a paper and she said, Je suis née à Essex en 2005. she would write né with a definite E at the end because she's a woman. So if you're writing a personal paper to me and you're using Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs in the passé composé, be sure you put the appropriate agreements in place, but you don't need any brackets because I know who the paper is coming from. Et ça c'est tout pour le passé composé avec êtres pour un auxiliaire. Si vous avez des questions ou des soucis, n'hésitez pas à me contacter. If you would like to re-watch this video lesson, you are more than welcome to do so. Just click on the link that I posted to Edsby, or you can check out my YouTube channel, Madame A. Win, and find the video there. Merci tout le monde et à la prochaine!